Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today we do the attack. So it's white to play here. Just let me know in the chat that you can hear me properly and your solutions. If anybody has an idea how to play with white, this is a rather simple position actually. There is a simple solution. White can create a strong tactical attack. Okay, anybody with a solution? All right, I see f take g4, and the problem is knight take g4, indeed only move. Okay, yes, this was also my idea in the game. Rook take g4, bishop take g4, f take g4, with perhaps the attack. This is also not really working properly. The right move is f take g4, knight take g4. Oh, okay. I see somebody here recommending rook take g4, sacrificing the exchange. Now queen take g4 drops the bishop on f5. So bishop take g4 is the only move. Knight e4. Okay, agreed. Double threat on d6 and on f6, which forks king and queen. So this is very, very dangerous. Only move is bishop e7, fixing both of the problems. Unfortunately, queen g6 would not be a good option due to knight f6 check, and the bishop on c2 is suddenly open on the queen. So bishop e7, and now very strong move, knight f6 check. Bishop f6, queen f6. And I think the hardest task is to realize that this position is basically winning for white. Let's move pieces on the board so that everything is a little more clear. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Yeah, no, coordinates are already on. Okay, sorry. Because normally I keep switching coordinates on and off. Okay, so knight e4, as we said, bishop e7 only move, here, here, here. Okay, why is this such a fantastic position? It might not be immediately obvious, but the threat is bishop h6, and it's really hard for black to stop mate on g7. Even though black has two moves to cover g7, there is no nice way to achieve it. So we need to clear the square g4 for the queen, which is what I did. Unfortunately, white is already a pawn up if he takes on f8, but he shouldn't really. Rook f1, black's rook is not running away. Okay, simple decision by white. He's simplifying the position. Pawn up and much better king. My king on g8 is really horrible. h6, only way to stop rook g5. But now the pawn on h6 is a target. Okay. And I decided that I lost enough material for this game, so I resigned. This was one of my shortest games ever, because basically this move g4 is from a theoretical position where I just forgot my analysis and I played something and it was a clear mistake and my opponent blitzed out the refutation and the game was over. So one of my worst games ever, but I think nice for a lecture to have a look. Nice attack by white, yeah? So kingside weaknesses were the main issue here. Nice as a warming up. Let's go to the next. The next is also not a very happy memory for me. All right. So in this game, I will be playing with black. Just a second. Actually, I'm sorry for that. I don't want to make my board bigger because my screen is not that big. If I make it any bigger, it will it will be uncomfortable for me, I think. Unless you mean like this. No, it doesn't do anything. Yeah, I think it's all right. Okay, we're not discussing the opening really. Lots of options for the two colors, of course. Okay, now I played c4, which is a very dubious decision, but relevant for our subject of dynamics and attack, defense, all this kind of, let's say, very concrete fighting. Of course, c4 is very ambitious. I'm looking for a strategy where I get control over the light squares. Let's say I get as many free moves as I want. b5, bishop g7, bishop b7, knight e4, short castle, f5, fantastic position on the light squares. So I have a positional idea. It's a bad one because, of course, white is not going to just wait and let me play any move that I want. White will make counterplay, and actually he has a nice target which can be attacked. That's the pawn on c4. Bishop c1 indeed is an interesting idea. Now the bishop on d2 is a very misplaced piece, but bishop c1 played in the game. Interesting move. Clearing the square on d2 for the knight and heading for a3. So I played e5. And my opponent took on e5. Not necessarily the best move, but this is not too important for us right now. Well, first relevant position for the attack is this one. Very nice candidate move is bishop a3. Looks like a good decision, preventing castling on the king side. If this was played in the game, I would already have felt rather depressed because, you know, instead of going for the attack with black, I'm now under pressure. It did not happen. Bishop takes c4, short castle. Black's position is not so bad here. Black, of course, is a pawn down, but with some compensation, the pawn on c3 is relatively weak. Black has decent activity, developing with some correct harmony. So all in all, the position is all right. This would have been an okay move, just preparing to put the rook on c8. And okay, we can argue that white is pushing for the advantage. That's true for sure. But at the same time, there is no super direct plan to hurt black too badly. So the pawn on c3 requires protection, and white's bishops are not that strong at the moment. So I think black has a rather reasonable position. Let me check if, instead of castling, to play bishop f5. Yes, that would also have been an option. I have it in my annotations. White will just have played queen b2, and the assessment is similar to the game. Actually, I think this is the correct setup for black to look for compensation. You know, the bishop is nice on e6 because white will most likely push c4 in the next future. So the bishop is already pointing in the correct direction. Having white's queen on b2 is not necessarily such a big achievement because also b7 will be under pressure. So it's a very natural move to play bishop f5, but I'm actually not criticizing my decision to castle. What I really should criticize is my decision to jump knight g4 here, starting tactical operations before I'm completing my development. Of course, at the time I thought I was being very smart. Right now, you know, I'm a bit wiser. I know the result of the game, not very happy with it. So white played f4. Of course, not h3, which doesn't stop mate. G3 also creates some weaknesses. F4 is not a perfect move, but it's concrete play and it's correct. Double threat on the queen and on h7. Now, if queen h5, I believe f3 is just simple and good. No real compensation for black, I believe. I play queen c5. My opponent played h3, not the most accurate. Probably the simplest was to play like this. Okay, take h7, allow black to recover a pawn on e3. So knight e3, bishop e3, queen e3, killing h1. White is a pawn up with a powerful bishop on e4, safer king. Yeah, that's it. White is just much better. The game was interesting. I played h3, knight e3. Okay, it was better now to be more modest, realize that knight g4 was a poor decision, play knight f6 and be much worse but not losing. This one is just super terrible. Queen f2, very nice move. And now this sideline is something that I really wanted to talk to you about. Bishop e3, queen h5. Okay, of course the position has changed, so we need to take a few moments to understand this position. We have opposite color bishops, which is a typical situation in chess and a very important one to master. And white's goal is to create an attack. The general rule on opposite color bishops is that heavy pieces are very important. They must be kept on the board if we want to create an attack. And the correct assessment is that this side with the more active pieces normally has a huge attack. That's because we have an extra piece on our color. Let's say white has a better extra piece on dark squares compared to black. So this allows us to create an attack. Nevertheless, beside the assessment and the theory, which allows us to understand more easily what to look for, now we need to create an attack. Let me see in the chat if you have suggestions. Oh, I see that you actually had questions earlier. Oh, I see. Yes, one of you actually maybe recommended an improvement on one of my lines. I see. You managed to win a piece, which I didn't. Okay, nice. Even better. Instead of bishop take a3, was queen h4 an option? Yeah. Okay, I see a recommendation for this specific position. Set up with bishop d4 or with f5. Also set up rook ae1, intending bishop d4 and rook e5. Yes, you are right, all of you. Generally speaking, those are correct moves, and that's also basically the direction where I would be looking. Now, for concrete play, probably the best move, also thanks to the engine, is f5 immediately. It fits our plan. We want to push f6 and destroy black's position. Also, we're preventing black's bishop from activating. There is a very nice positional point, f6, just to prevent the attack. And now fantastic move, g4. Okay, this is not so obvious and a little bit tricky to find, but strategically very correct. The point is queen h3, queen f4, followed by rook f2, rook h2, game over. Or rook f3, king g2, rook h1. I mean, we have a million ways to execute the idea. Black's queen is poorly placed. So we get our harmony, and later we are going to push g5 and destroy black's position. So yeah, this is not playable for black. Active play by white just wins the game. I saw an earlier question, instead of bishop take e3, if there was a queen h4. Oh yes, here, maybe queen h4 check. Okay, if king g8, queen d8 check, of course. So king g6 only move. And well, now if you take on d8, I can take on f1 and position is messy. I think you missed that king g6 is a move. Okay, let's continue. This was played in the game. Oh, is rook b1, rook b4 a good idea? Ah, yes, you meant in the position with opposite color bishops. Probably it is. Yeah, it makes sense at least. But I really prefer this very direct idea to play f5, g4. And yeah, if we didn't have this direct attack, then yes, rook b1, rook b4 would be very nice to bring more pieces into the attack. It's not really necessary this way because we already got enough. And we can use the rook on e1 to enter the game. So here, king h1 is a move, yes. Well, actually, we have many moves in this position. Two of the easiest are either bishop d3 or bishop c2. Just, you know, moving away from h7 where the bishop is hanging. This is maybe the most, well, objectively probably the strongest. Although here we are already in the area of just winning. This is a funny line. Bishop is coming to a3. Well, material is equal and black is obviously lost. Now we need to sacrifice the queen, if we can call it sacrificing, when we are desperate. And yeah, after we sacrifice the queen, we will be a queen down and white still has an attack. So white wins. Also nice is the way my opponent played in the game. Just a pretty attack, this one. Not very complex game, this one. Just very direct. White played much better than black. Bishop c2. Okay, took on c3. This was also a move, but this is just a sample line. Of course, there are different ways to play. Very strong attack. I'm both pinned on, I mean, my knight on e3 is pinned and my king is very weak. So I have problems everywhere, which I cannot solve. I took on c3, just allowing my opponent to finish the game very nicely. Here, 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 here. And now little nice harmony for white, please. a4, nice move. You want to put your bishop on a3. Try not to be as spectacular, because I don't want to sacrifice my bishop on c2 unless I really have to. Bishop a4, okay, threatening queen h8 and queen e8. Nice. Bishop e3. Bishop e3 is my favorite. Simple move on a square where the bishop is protected, pointing at f7 and threatening bishop a3. For me, this is like the perfect move, you know, doing everything at the same time. I played b5, okay. I really don't have good moves, so I played the bad ones. And game over. Queen h8 mate next. Okay, of course, the final attack could have been played in different ways. Basically, what happened to me in the game is that I allowed white to take on h7, thinking that it would not be too bad. And obviously, it was very bad. This queen coming to f2 basically meant that my position was collapsing everywhere. So let's now see something different, a bit harder maybe. Just a second, my chat is running away from me. All right. Okay, this game is much more complex. Okay, we're already in a messy position. White achieved quite a lot in the center. He's got this very powerful pawn on e5, so a space advantage and clear hope for a strong initiative. At the same time, with black, I'm basically aiming to destroy white's center because before he can actually create the initiative. I played queen c8. There is a clear prize for white's initiative. That's a central pawn. And this is my first real decision in the game. Position is already very complicated. But until here, I was quite confident. I thought, okay, I pick up one of my opponent's pawn. It's a central pawn. I was very optimistic, also because I was a bit younger. I hadn't lost as many games as I have now. So I felt that, okay, I have a pawn. What can go wrong? And actually here, there is a lot which can go wrong in the position, although black is okay. And well, this is, I think, a very nice game for our attack subject. Position is completely unclear. I'm still not so sure what the assessment is and how exactly the position should be played. Knight c6 is one of the moves. It was played in a few games. There was even a game by Tal from this position with white, where, of course, he crushed the opponent. Knight c6 was played. I played bishop e4. Knight c6, let's have a look. I thought about it during the game also. I don't remember exactly what my thoughts were at the time, but f5, logical. And white does have a lot of initiative. Now, I don't want to click on my arrow because you will see the moves, but maybe like this I can. Yes, okay, so this way you didn't see anything. Good. Bishop e7 makes a lot of sense. And now, what is the strong attacking move that we can play? Queen g4, very, very interesting. Aiming at g7. Okay, g7 is of course a target. f6, wow, very direct. You want to sacrifice a pawn to open up your file for the rook. I don't really support this type of sacrifices. You need to have a little more of a specific idea, because actually here black can take and he's still very solid. We don't have a clear way through all of those pawns. So not f6. Queen g4, interesting. Also not really what I was looking for. I think we have a very, very strong forward move. Okay, I see a recommendation instead of bishop e7 to try maybe h5, okay, to prevent queen g4, maybe. And I see two of you are recommending queen h5 here to white. Indeed, queen h5 is correct. And according to the machine, white is already winning, which I think is not very surprising after all. I don't have a move with black, which is very scary. White is bringing more pieces into the attack. Threat is f take e6. If I castle, f take e6 basically mates me. And I don't really have a move, because I believe if bishop f6 already, well, bishop f4 developing with attack would be okay, but maybe knight d5 is even stronger. I'm not sure what to do with my square on d6. So already a very bad position for black. This queen h5 is a very strong positional move and attacking move at the same time. So let's not play bishop e7. g6, natural move. Also very possible. Unfortunately, white doesn't care too much. Tal's game continued g take f5, and here Tal took with the bishop on f5, which is all right, but stronger is just to use the opportunity to bring the queen to h5. And, well, it's not obvious, of course, but according to my engine, white is already winning, actually. Again, not too surprising, because white is very ready to start sacrificing everywhere and crushing black. Well, after all, queen on c8, king on e8, they don't coordinate very well. The bishop on g5 is already well positioned to strike. Queen on h5, taunting on f7 already. And next, when the rook is coming, rook a1, all of white's pieces are entering the game. So maybe better was to play bishop g7. Of course, I also checked bishop e7, but just exchanging bishops leaves black with very horrible dark squares. So bishop g7, best move, whatever that means in this position. Knight b5. The bishop on e5 is a very strong defender, so it's very logical that now we exchange it by tactics on bishop f6, knight d6 recovers a a queen, actually. Very nice move, this f6. Most probably knight d6 was also decent, but king is very important. So now white's idea is queen d2, queen h6, queen g7. Very basic, very simple, and completely deadly. There's no way to escape. It's a very funny line. Okay, at least rook g8 will be helping black, but black is only a pawn up. White is bringing all the pieces into the attack, and I think the assessment should not be surprising to anybody. Black cannot defend a position like this. And rook h4. Of course, this is not really the only way to play, but it's good enough and definitely proving that black cannot survive the position. Because black's moves were kind of forced, while white, okay, he might have had other options, but this is very natural, very simple, very direct, and I think quite nice. I like when, you know, a simple concept like pawn on f6 and dark squares just works out so nicely without much of a calculation effort. Just very direct line. d5 also possible. Same story. Okay, at least the knight on g4 is preventing queen h6. And this is beautiful. The bishop cannot be taken due to queen g5 check. So white picks up the knight on g4. And of course, then mates black. Because the knight on g4 was not only important in general, but very important specifically for the square on h6. All right. So as you can imagine, these kind of ideas were not very fun for black. I don't think that they actually calculated this during the game, to be honest. I just felt that this was very risky. Knight d4 also makes a lot of sense. This is actually not too clear. This is an option. Lots of compensation for white, I think, but black managed to keep the position rather closed. So, of course, I stopped here. There's enough compensation for white, but black is also surviving because I think black is solid enough. I'm not so sure that I really enjoy this too much, but it's probably reasonable. Of course, we should never play e5 in such position to allow a white knight on d5. Let's move the queen somewhere or maybe play d6. The position is risky, of course. Maybe queen b7 is the right move. I'm not so sure. Oh, but bishop e5 is also a threat, so maybe we have to play d6. Not my favorite because it's also creating some weaknesses. So this feels like, you know, maybe playable, but a bit shaky. I'm not supporting this position very much for black. And it's not the only way to prove compensation, because knight take e4 is also sensible, keeping the position a little more open, especially on the e file. Very strong move, this g4, because white's attack was starting to slow down. Yeah. Yes. You're quite excited about the position, yes? Yes. Agreed. White is having a lot of fun. Yeah, also for me, games where we have an attack are, you know, the most proud moments in chess. Yeah, I think white is definitely winning here. Black is getting crushed. And yeah. So we had the positional compensation, which was quite unpleasant, and this is more or less the tactical way. Of course, white also took some responsibilities. It's not easy in a practical game to be accurate and to spot all of these moves. It's not impossible either. I mean, it can be done, of course. But this is proving that white's position is very, very promising. To finish, one of you actually asked a question, which I find very, very strange. One of you came up with h5, which is something that my engine also recommended. But when I read it from the engine, I was thinking that probably nobody will ever dare to play h5 here without, concrete study beforehand, because the move is very deep. It's taking away a square on h5 from the queen and also the square on g4. So, okay, chess is very nice this way, that we can always go deeper and find new things. Very surprising to me, because black is underdeveloped after all, and white is creating an attack. And for me to move a pawn which slightly weakens the square on g6 is rather surprising. But it's a correct move. It was really, really important to take away this square on h5 from the queen. We have seen in a few lines how important, how strong the queen on h5 is. So h5, amazing. Still, white has compensation. Let's give a simple recommendation for white, bishop e3. I also checked king h1, but if I remember, that's a slightly worse version. f6, also important, kind of necessary, just reinforcing the position. Strange moves by black, but engines are like this. Now, this one is a move that I appreciate from a human standpoint. Bishop on d6, active, heading for e5. And some position like this. The engine is very creative. By building f6, h5 fortress on the king side, he's slowing down white's attack quite a bit. So, unclear position. I don't know what to say really about this one. Very complicated. I assume some of you will be much happier with white. He does have, powerful ideas, but black is a pawn up and he's got this strong point on e5 from which he can protect the position. Yeah, I think from a human standpoint, we can be happy with white. We make some initiative. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure if Carson was black, he would be defending so hard that maybe in the end of the day, everybody will think, yeah, but black was doing well. This kind of situation. I think it takes a strong player to play reasonably with black, because it's so easy to make a little mistake and suddenly the position just crumbles. I see a question in Q&A. I'm sorry for that. If you ask me questions, I would prefer if you use the chat. That's a bit easier for me. Anyway, I see, what if white plays queen f3, intending to take on e6? Okay. All right, let's go back and answer the question. I think you meant from this position here, queen f3, logical move, indeed. I didn't check it, but I think knight d4 will be logical. The queen is under attack, so I guess queen f2 here. Of course, there's the odds that I'm going to blunder in the next few moves is very high from such a position. Actually, yeah, this is very... Oh, but I can take, yes? Here, and this is very important. I managed to block the file for a second, but a very important second. And hopefully I'm not crushed here. Not 100% sure, as usual when there are so many pieces hanging, but it feels like this would work. Here, there might, of course, white doesn't need to sacrifice. We can take d take e4 maybe, but I'm not sure that this queen f3, queen f2 achieved much for white. And on knight take e4, another great point of having a pawn on h5, white will never be able to push g4. Like here, if we take with a knight, we are safe, thanks to the pawn on h5. This is the computer magic, yes? Somehow the pawn on h5 is very useful. All right, yeah, but queen f3 was a logical question, of course. In the game, I did not explore this direction. Instead, I think it's quite reasoning is that, you know, white is creating an attack. I want to exchange the attackers. It's a valid principle in many positions. So I've got the same position, but bishop off the board. So, well, the downside is that the knight on e4 is much more active than on c3. So you never know in chess. In either case, white has full compensation. f5, I'm still under pressure. Of course, it sounds like a joke, but my machine still says that maybe h5 is the right move. I really appreciate the irony of the computer. I will maybe go back to that later, because you know, to start by h5 is completely crazy. Okay, 94, still very similar problems. Yeah, in practical play, I agree with you. It's very hard to play with black. Quite a tricky position. Well, if you have studied it, I think the line with h5, it's something you can play. I mean, once you've checked the lines enough that you're comfortable enough with the position and you understand it, then it's maybe playable. But yes, if you know nothing and the opponent is coming for the attack, normally it's very dangerous. Also, this kind of assessment depends on your level. For a grandmaster level, you know, the technique in defending positions can be quite high, so we can survive positions that don't look very easy at first. Of course, if it's a rapid or blitz time control, then the level in defense lowers a lot. But yeah, practically not the most comfortable position for sure. And this bishop g5 is actually just an objective advantage for white. Just to remind you, if bishop e7 here, bishop e7, king e7, g4, this is exactly a line that we already checked. g6 maybe. I'm so scared of knight f6 check, but I understand your point that maybe it's not too bad, but it will create weaknesses that stay forever. So g6, maybe I just play queen h3 and continue my attack. Now the square on f6 is so weak. I would hate to have this position on the board. This feels really, really bad, no matter what you do. So yeah, maybe g6 is playable somehow, but I can't believe that black can survive this one. It's looking really, really wrong. Okay, but after all, you know, black spent a bit of time to take on e5. Now it's going back to c6, then heading for d4. We cannot play chess with only one knight jumping around while the queen is on c8, the bishop on f8, and the king in the center. So I think there are very good reasons why white should be rewarded with a strong attack. Bishop e7, I think, is a logical move. much more logical than knight d4, I would say. f6, yes, very strong. Take, 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 take. I was a bit surprised that this position is not actually super bad. h5, sort of a prophylaxis move, not allowing queen h5 once again. Of course, white has fantastic compensation, but game is not over. The engine proves that things are not that easy, at least. This is a very promising position for white. Yeah, h5 is a key move. It sounds like a joke to me, you know, when the computers first said e5. I think I checked it yesterday or 2 days ago. At first I thought, okay, this is the typical joke. Engine puts h5 and then 3 minutes later, engine resigns. But it seems to work. And well, there are some reasons, like, you know, clear the square on h7 for the rook from time to time, and we don't allow bishop h6, which kind of destroys our play. Not so sure. Basically here, black is aiming to lose the pawn on f7 with as much decency as he can, you know. It's bad, but we keep our class, let's say. We don't go crazy. And yeah, we allow white to recover the material, and we hope that his bishop will not be too powerful. This is more or less black's story of the game, let's say. And he's quite successful, actually. Okay, this is a very important point. Bishop g5 here, very dangerous. For some reason, this bishop f4 pin kills black's position. Rook e1 next, spoiling the structure, then bishop take e5. One thing that I really learned from the machines is that chess seems to collapse once your pawn structure, you know, breaks completely. Like here, we have a risky position. Suddenly, our pawn structure gets destroyed, and we go from a position where we're fighting very hard to just basically lost. Well, by lost, I mean lost by accurate play by the opponent, of course. We're dealing with positions that are, well, you know, giving reasonable odds for a fight. We're not talking positions that are already over. But somehow then the position, the pawn structure gets spoiled, and suddenly your odds are gone. And I think this is something nice to remember. You know, when we are defending, we really want to have at least some long-term positive aspect, let's say. And so far, for me, this is something that I understood a long time ago. I think it's very reasonable. But the fact that you should aim to destroy the opponent's pawn structure when you have a position with lots of initiative and plus, for me, this was not so obvious until recently. And it looks like quite a decent rule as far as I can see. It comes from a lot of practical analysis. Somehow this pattern seems to exist. Little bit surprising, but yeah, pawn structure is very important in chess. So, but black was kind of reasonable, if I remember correctly, if he doesn't allow this bishop f4 pin. Still, very unpleasant position. Okay, I see in the chat. Yes, king safety, white piece activity. Well, material is equal, but yeah, pawn structure is better for white. Yes, you're right. If you keep score like this, it sounds like white must have a better position. Yes, it's better in so many factors. True, true. That's not exactly how I assess positions by myself, but I think it's a reasonable system. Anyway, I don't really use such way of thinking where I'm assessing the position, but I think it's a reasonable one anyway. And it's a good for, you know, for an explanation also. So for some reason, h5 once again, prophylaxis, deep prophylaxis is the best bet. Not really fantastic. Continue the prophylaxis. And we reach, this is not forced, it's just, yeah, h5 is, well, it's not completely inhuman because we learned to make such moves from time to time. But of course, if you've never seen the position and you're at the board, it's quite unlikely that you will end up by playing h5. I agree. Unless you're a very strong player and you spend a very long time and you go for creative moves, it's very hard, I think. But in some positions, playing h5 makes sense. So it's not like the move h5 is, out of the world from that point of view. If you've seen enough positions, it can cross your mind to actually play it and to feel that that's the right one. It takes a very long time. I'm not so sure how many people will find it. It makes sense. I mean, we can make sense of the move at least, which means is something that we can use somehow in our chess. So yes, strange move, but maybe not so strange after this lesson, That's why we analyze in chess. So we increase our repertoire of chess weapons. But yeah, please don't go around play h5 in every position. It's normally a little tricky. E5, rook f5. So this is what I played in the game. Of course, I was not super happy to open up the E file, but I felt that I will be in time to escape. Unfortunately, I'm not. Really, really tricky position. I should have played D6 apparently, which, the knight on C6 is no longer protected by a pawn. So for myself as a human player, especially at the time that I was also a bit weaker as a player, this was a very hard decision to play D6. I think I considered it, but I didn't play it. Very dangerous position. Now we reach the moment of concrete confrontation with the opponent. But I'm quite lucky that I managed to enter a forcing variation where white cannot actually mate. It's quite lucky, I think, but here white only has nice compensation. This position should be assessed as equal. Knight d7 check, recovering the material, but black is okay. King c7 and probably knight f6 repetition. So black can escape this way. Cold blood. It was apparently important to bring the queen closer. Okay, this is not absolutely forced. There are other variations. This is a very important line to try and understand the position. If white broke through in this line, he would be winning. Of course, white can have compensation in different ways. You were asking here, what if queen f6 here? Good question. I assume that queen f3 will be very, very dangerous. Intending queen c6 check and take the rook on a8. Yeah, but logical question, yes? Just queen f3. Unfortunately, I cannot do that. Yeah, it's very easy to get confused. Of course, I got a lot of help from my machine while annotating this game. Queen f1, also very logical, I think. f6 only move. We can understand that black is not very happy while making a move like f6. It feels like we're looking for a sacrifice by white that completely opens our king. Lucky enough, there is no such sacrifice. Actually, black is very strong here. Strange, because the bishop on e7 is very ugly. Of course, white has good compensation on the light squares, but a pawn is a pawn, and by carefully defending, black is definitely not worse here, actually. I prefer black. So maybe stronger is this powerful move, brilliantly looking. It's a brilliant one. Queen d7. White is creating very strong tactical play. Very nice move, this rook f6 and rook d6. But who is better here? I think that's a very open question. Looks like the position will be roughly equal. Black has a lot of material, but he's pinned. So probably not really an advantage for black. Yeah, balanced probably. In the end of the day, we've seen so many crazy lines, so much complications, and probably balanced position. But at least it was not a boring game. This is very, very interesting chess. So we can assess the position as very nice compensation for white, very practical play, and actually black's moves are much harder than white's, as it happens many times when we're dealing with attack and defense. Attack is normally easier because we enjoy it more and the ideas are more direct. I blame myself too much for that, but it's a bad move. And I'm getting in trouble. Now, taking on f6, I think again we can make the little point of the pawn structure and of creating long-term weaknesses. The reason why I'm crushed here and not in the other variation is that in the other variation, black's position was very tough long-term. While here, in order to escape my short-term problems of white trying to checkmate me in 3 moves, I created weaknesses. And yeah, castle is probably the only move, but just bishop h6, rook f1. White just continues to play. It's not like the initiative will be over in 2 moves. He keeps going, he keeps fighting, and I have long-term problems. So once again, that's the key. Yeah, no, this is just horrible. Much better for white. My weaknesses will stay forever, and I don't have any safety. So this is bad, yeah. But also, we must keep in mind, when we're defending, of course, we need to make sure we don't allow long-term advantages to the opponent, but we also need to make sure that it doesn't mate us. So very hard to balance everything. Yeah, good question. How deeply should we analyze our games? I think you should analyze as much as it's interesting for you. I mean, to bore yourself by checking too many details that you don't care about is not good. But as long as you keep an interest, the deeper you go, the more you can learn. So yeah, because our games, you know, they provide us with interesting material that normally we should care about because it's our game, you know, somehow. I'm not claiming that I've checked all of the games that I've played very deeply because, okay, it's human to be lazy, but I think that's the right thing to do. So as deeply as you find it interesting, and that's the goal. There's so much we can learn from our games. Actually, I hadn't checked this one too carefully until yesterday, basically. But it's a shame. I would have learned so much more if I went deeper into the game. Of course, I rechecked it, but not as deeply as I'm showing now. Also, the position was very hard to analyze at the time, because even for the computers, this kind of position is very hard. But the conclusion here is very clear. Similar to the other line, white has fantastic positional compensation, and my king on e8 is in trouble. So this is basically the end of our complex discussion, let's say. Still very interesting to see how the game continued, because I survived the game, which is very surprising, 10 years later, looking at the game. It feels like black is just getting crushed. And of course, objectively, game is over. Now he played queen e4. Even stronger was queen h4, intending bishop g5, rook a1, and basically shaking hands next, because knight d5 opens up all of the position. The rooks, the queen, all of white's pieces are entering the attack. So queen h4, simple move, over. He missed it, queen e4. Still not so bad. I mean, he put queen h6. This is a nice tactical trick that I believe he missed. He probably thought that he can take on c6, but I can take on f6, and I'm very lucky. That's why I moved my rook away from a8, so it would not be hanging. So at least I managed to activate my queen to e6. So in the end of the day, it only cost me the exchange, and I have a pawn for an exchange. So game is not over. Not at all. And okay, this is not an attack class anymore, but still a good game. White's task, technically speaking, should be to get some sort of g4 move to open up the position, open a file. That's where the rook is open files. If we have no open files, then it's different. So yeah, this is the correct way. This would have made me resign once more, basically. But okay, he kept missing his opportunities. So I activated. And I think the reason why I survived the game is that long term here I have ideas. Like my position is dubious. Anyway, white can go to this kind of g4 plans in some way. So white still has an objective advantage, but technically quite hard, while I might survive, and I did survive the game, because I have long-term ideas of at least a good pawn structure where my bishop is quite, quite well coordinated with the pawns. White's pawn on c4 is on c4, and not. I will prefer the pawn on c3 to try and push d4 and fight against the bishop. So I have some structural reasons why long-term my position could be okay. Like I said, white is still better, but this would, white needs good technique and to play good moves. White is still much better. I mean, maybe we can discuss this more in a lecture on technique. Not basic technique. I mean, this is a complex task for white. This is not basic at all. Black already got a pawn and some reasons to survive. Well, I did manage in the end. I'm just going to show you what my trick was in the end. Basically, our serious lesson time is over. I got lucky that here, this would have been okay, keeping the fight open. Still much better for white. Just needs to open up a few files for the rooks, little by little. Got lucky that he played d4, low on time, of course. And he missed my tactics, knight c2. Now black is all right. Okay, in mutual time trouble, there were some mistakes. For instance, this is already a fortress, enough material for black to be okay. Not so many weaknesses, strong place on e5 for the bishop, everything is protected. Okay, actually, I think I might have played for more somewhere around here, which was a little over-optimist. Nice move a5, just to make sure that, potentially I have counterplay on a pawn on a4. And my bishop is nice on c5. Okay, there were again some opportunities for white to try and push g4 somewhere around here. Yeah, this would have been some g4. But okay, good for me that we were low on time. And in the end of the day, after a few more mistakes, finally, I chose the fortress and the game was a draw. Basically, there's no way for white to improve here. So of course, we can say that I got lucky. And the way I helped my luck was to somehow, at least from a point onward, I managed to at least have some control over e5 and d4. And I managed to keep a pawn structure that in the end of the day was fine long-term. This really helped my odds to survive. Also, of course, I got lucky that white was confused and the second part of the game was not great by white. Also, I think he was a bit shocked that he didn't manage to mate me by the attack. So, very complex game. I think very interesting. And I think this is all for now. So everybody have a nice day and thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.